It is Thursday, October 5th, 2023, and you're watching the MMA Eco Live podcast. I am your host, Chris Presnell, owner of MMA Ecosystem. I've written for a lot of different MMA media outlets. I also work for myself, work for Tapology, mainly focused on the fighter records from China, a couple other random countries, and also the American Pacific Northwest. If this is your first time, really happy you could join us on this episode of the podcast. If you haven't already, would really appreciate your subscription to the channel. Getting close to 1,000 subs, over about almost 80% of the way there. So really trying to push forward towards that 1,000 sub goal. Once that happens, a lot of other things can start happening on this channel that I'm really excited about, and overall MMA ecosystem. On today's episode, we've got a handful of different things to cover. Going to go down the Asian MMA schedule for the weekend, going to take your questions. And yeah, a lot of great events going on this weekend. Nothing like earth-shattering major, but a lot of the major promotions offering up some somewhat solid offerings, including the UFC, a couple Asian fighters competing there as well in Las Vegas. So let's get into it. Of course, always first up on this show is the One Friday Fights. That's the literal very first thing that goes on over the weekend. Tomorrow, they've got two fights on the card. That's Zayudin Suleymanov versus Adilet Mamitov. And then I don't want to say the only Asian fighter, but Carlos Alvarez from Philippines. He is fighting on the card, and he will be fighting, see if I can get this guy's name right, through Corn Chai Chong Darden. And I believe this guy is from France, if I'm not mistaken. That sounds like a very Thai name. He looks like he could be from Thailand, but yes, he fights out of France. Interesting, yeah, just looking at this guy and his record right now. 3-1 French fighter. His only loss, guess who his only losses to? Cedric Doumbé. That was in Mixed Martial Arts Grand Prix. But he will be fighting 3-0 Filipino fighter Carlos Nehaban Alvarez. This will go down at lightweight. So that goes down from Lumpini Stadium in Bangkok, Thailand tomorrow. You can catch the results from that on my Instagram account, MMA Ecosystem. But yeah, so kicking things off with One Friday Fights. And by the way, if you have any questions, you can throw those in the chat at any point during the live stream. So would appreciate that. That way we can have some lively discussion later. And then tomorrow, back-to-back One Amazon Prime cards. We had the One Amazon Prime show last Friday from Singapore with Stamp versus Ham. Thought both fighters looked pretty good, but kind of, I mean, hate to toot my own horn, but like kind of just like I said, it was like both fighters landing, but it was Stamp that landed the harder punches and eventually was able to take out Ham in the third round with a knee and some punches. So congrats to her. Angela Lee also retiring last weekend, and I think a lot of us knew it was coming. I had heard that was going to be the case. Didn't want to say it, didn't want to ruin her moment, but overall, I was glad the way that One Championship handled it. They totally put her in the driver's seat with that. And originally, I know on the show last week, I was like, if she's going to retire, why doesn't she do it already so they can build this fight as the undisputed championship? And in a sense, I think the way that it worked out was almost better, where it felt like there was a very seamless sort of, almost like a literal handoff of the belt from Angela Lee to Stamp. So in that way, I'm actually pretty happy with the way that turned out. Anytime you have a champ vacate a belt, it can take some time for the new champion to really like settle in and feel like they are the best in their division. So, but I think that this was a really good way to do it. Even though, like, man, like, could we ever get Angela Lee versus Stamp? Wow, that would be a great fight, right? And who knows what Angela Lee's going to do? I mean, she's still pretty young. Shoot, even like 3-4 years down the line, who's to stop her from unretiring and coming back? You know, one championship would put her right back in there for the belt. So, yeah, the thing is like, for Stamp Fairtex being the champ in the one atomweight division, guys, I feel like that division is pretty close to being like cleaned out, right? Like, there's really, like, who's going to fight Stamp next? There's really not a whole lot of challengers. She's been around for a long time. She's fought everybody. Even like Ritu Fogat, like, I mean, I know they've already fought, but like, she's MIA. Who knows what's going to happen with her? I feel like one championship just really needs to speed things up with trying to get some women in that division, and both of their women's divisions, strawweight and atomweight. So yeah, kind of a weird predicament there. Congrats to Stamp. She looked amazing. She's the perfect champion for one championship. She's one of the top athletes in their whole promotion, next to like Rod Tang and Rod Tang and Anatoly Malikin and Superbon and sorry, not Superbon, but he's not a champion anymore. But yeah, interesting times. All that to say, we do have another Amazon Prime Fight Night tomorrow night, which I do now that I say that, I realize that last weekend show was supposed to be like a month earlier, beginning of September, but they ended up moving it. So yeah, instead, now they've got this show in Bangkok tomorrow night. And originally we had Tong Kai in that fight, in that event, but he had to pull out because of injury. Oh, and by the way, this week I found like 3 more fights that were not on Tong Kai's record that I added to his record. So on Tapology, yeah, guys, earlier he was like, what, like 15 and what was his record? I'm about to see. I'm just pulling it up. At the beginning of this week on Tapology, we had Tong Kai as 15-2. Well, we've got him now as 18-2. I found a couple fights very early on in his career. 2 fights from a promotion called WBK, and then another fight from, let's see. Not seeing it on here. Oh, that's why. And then another fight that was in a promotion called Yuden Feng Showdown. But I added that on there as well. He fought a Mongolian guy named Bat Jargle. So Tong Kai got him as 18-2 now. We'll see if one championship reflects that next time he fights. So that's cool. But yeah, we got one fight night, 15 going down tomorrow. Instead of Tong Kai, we've got an interim lightweight championship interim featherweight championship between Tan Lei, who Tong Kai just beat, and Ilya Fraimanov, who a lot of people are kind of seeing as like the next challenger to Tong Kai. So I think that should be a great fight. Ilya Fraimanov is a really cool fighter. So looking forward to that. And then you've got some other pretty good fights on there, 2 really good Chinese guys on the card. Joshua Pasio versus Mansur Malachiev of Russia. That's a really weird fight, guys. Like, a guy who's 1-0 in the promotion, he submitted Jeremy Miato, and then they're automatically throwing him basically against the #1 contender at strawweight, Joshua Pasio, who's the former champion. Really strange fight, if you ask me. I would have thought that they would have tried to either give Pasio an immediate rematch against Jared Brooks or against another guy, at least in the rankings. But you know how it is with one championship. The rankings almost don't mean anything. They have ranked fighters fight fighters outside the rankings all the time. So should be an interesting fight. I don't really know much about Pasio's opponent here. But you've got that. Got Zhang Li Peng fighting Timofey Nastyushin. And Nastyushin on a little bit of a losing streak, getting a little bit older. Possible, in my opinion, that we see Zhang Lipeng get a knockout here. And then probably the fight that is the most intriguing to me style-wise on the card is Eko Rani Saputra, who is honestly one of the best fighters out of Indonesia right now, fighting against Hu Yang of China, who I think is one of the forgotten fighters in like Chinese MMA as far as like good prospects go. He's powerful, he's really fast, got really fast hands, and could shut the lights out for Eko Rani Saputra. So looking forward to that a lot. And then a fight that actually broke last week, you've got Hiroyuki Tetsuka fighting Jin Tae-ho. So that should be a lot of fun too. Both guys really fun grapplers. Tetsuka, more of a knockout guy, or also a very good knockout guy. So especially those MMA fights, probably going to deliver pretty hard on that show. Of course, there are other fights on the card which have been talked about quite. Actually, Mikey Musumeci fighting Shinya Aoki seemed like zero hype for that. Very interesting fight. I guess that's an open weight fight, so it's not even for the belt. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of take it or leave it for me when there's really like not much stakes. But of course, yeah, there are other fights on the card, other title fights. Tawin Chai's on the card. I usually stick to the MMA, at least in my coverage, but doesn't mean you can't enjoy those fights as well. All right, going on to Saturday. Opening up the day on Saturday, we've got Lion Championship 10. I think this is the first time I've talked about them on this show. Lion Championship, I would say probably the top, if not like the only promotion in Vietnam right now, especially that's consistently putting on shows. Guys, they literally have a show every single month, and the prelims are all amateur, main card is all pro fights. Most of these fighters have, I think actually all of them, less than 5 fights. So on the lower level of things, but this is how you give experience to your athletes, right? The show is really well run, really solid, smooth production. It's in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. And on this particular event, they've got 2 title fights. And the top one, the main event, I'm actually kind of excited for. That is featuring 2 Vietnamese prospects that you probably haven't heard of, but more and more I'm like, yeah, one of these women could be a pretty solid prospect going forward. That is for the strawweight belt. Truc Nguyen is defending her belt against Ho Thi Nguyen Beach. No idea if I got those pronunciations right. But Truc Nguyen, as far as I can tell, she's 1-0 or 2-0, and then Ho Thi Nguyen, I believe she is 4-0. So 2 undefeated women, and both of them pretty much exclusively fought in Lion Championship. So that's one to look for. I believe those are streamed on their Facebook page, so you can watch those for free. I'm not totally sure on the time on that, but if you just look them up on Facebook, you'll get all the information. Lion Championship 10. And then JCK, their show, JCK Fight Night 70, goes down on Saturday morning. Main 2 fights that I'll highlight on that is you've got Road to UFC alum Asakurbai Jinen Sabieka. He's fighting another Mongolian guy, or I guess Asakurbai, he's Kazakh. Tungliga is Mongolian, I believe. So that's the main event. Honestly, they feel kind of like 2 mirror images of each other, both really strong, powerful, big guys, both really good wrestlers. So I honestly have no idea who's going to win that. Also on that card, you have a prospect, Li Yixuan, who is a woman. I believe this fight is at flyweight. She kind of went semi-viral on Twitter for her last JCK fight because she was the one that nailed that dragon sleeper choke. Kind of I don't even know how to describe it. I tweeted it out, and then it kind of went viral. But yeah, that was interesting. She is 3-0 as a pro. Like I said, fights at flyweight, and she's fighting Li Guangjun, who trains out of Yuancheng Bo's gym in Guangdong province. So yeah, that's what to look for on JCK. Most of you probably won't have the resources to be able to watch that live, so you can check the results on my Instagram page, MMA Ecosystem, for that. We've got our live One Pride Fight Night show on Saturday, and that is in Semarang, Indonesia. Airs at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. The key fight on there is another Road to UFC guy. That's Billy Pasulutan fighting Rustam Hutugulu. So that's a strawweight fight, and I believe that's a unification bout as well. So Rustam, he took the interim belt while Billy was fighting in Road to UFC. So this is a title unification fight. Yeah, glad that Billy is going back to One Pride. Glad that he is going to be able to get a little bit more experience. We've got to keep these really good Indonesian prospects. We've got to keep them in rotation, get them more fights. So yeah, we've got Billy back in action. And then if you saw my YouTube short from yesterday, from what I posted last night, there's a handful of fighters from Bali MMA that are fighting at One Pride on Saturday. We won't know the results from those fights because they're on the prelims, and then they like broadcast them for the next couple weekends afterwards. So we won't know the results, but a couple solid fighters on there. You've got Rinaldi Mansa, who is a 3-0 bantamweight, Alan Darmawan, a 2-1 lightweight, and then the other guy I'm blanking on. Two other guys from, one guy is like 0-4, so I didn't mention him, but yeah, Bali MMA has 4 fighters fighting at One Pride this Saturday. Let's see, we're flying through this here. UFC. So we've got 2 fighters from Asia fighting on this UFC card on Saturday. Overall, I think it's a fairly good card. More from like a intriguement, entertainment standpoint than like a high impact divisional rankings kind of fight card. But I am interested in the Aoriqileng and the Kanako Murata fight. Murata has been out for a long time, and she was the Invicta champion at strawweight. Really good grappler, very creative. Been out for a long time due to injury. She is back against Vanessa Demopoulos. I would say I would pick Murata against her, but the 2 variables here are, one, Murata being out for injury, meaning that she still may not be 100%, or she may have gotten a lot better in her time away. The other thing is Vanessa Demopoulos, I feel like usually overperforms what I expect from her. So that kind of gives me a little bit of question picking her against Kanako Murata. All that to say, my head says to pick Murata to be better basically everywhere against Demopoulos, but depends a lot on how healthy Murata is. The other fight is Aoriqileng versus Johnny Munoz Jr. I feel like this is a fight Aoriqileng should win. I also think that he's better in most places. I think he's going to be able to use his speed to either get like a later TKO finish or a decision win against Johnny Munoz. Munoz really doesn't have any like what I would say is like high level wins on his record. He has always proven to be a tough guy, but I think that Aoriqileng, especially starting to really fill out at bantamweight, I think that he's going to take this. He's been at Fight Ready MMA for a long time now. Really looking looking strong in the training videos that I've seen, just his strength and conditioning. So I think that I'm going to lean towards him in this. But yeah, Aoriqileng he has shown flashes of brilliance and like flashes of like really intense violence. But it seems like a couple things just aren't really calibrated right for him yet. So hopefully now that he's had a couple camps with Fight Ready, some of those things are starting to figure out, and he can start climbing up the division. So yeah, I've got that. The entire event, of course, is headlined by Grant Dawson against Bobby Green. Also got Drew Dober on the card. He's always fun. So that's UFC event. Trying to think if there's anything newsworthy to mention. I am going to be getting an update on the main event of the UFC event on December 9th soon. It could be someone different from Peter Yan, but yeah, I'll be hearing about that shortly, and I was hoping to have it ready by this show, but don't have an update just quite yet. Still haven't heard anything on Li Jingliang. He is fully expecting to fight at the event. Again, like nothing official on the event taking place in Shanghai, but like, I mean, you guys have seen it. It's not just me now. Everyone's saying it's in Shanghai, like fighters, managers, all that. So it feels like it's like probably like on the 1 yard line to be in Shanghai, but still could change. And I would think we'll probably know within the next couple days if it's actually going to go down in Shanghai. So other than that, we heard about Jeka Sargi's fight, right? He's going to be fighting. Who's he going to be fighting? I'm blanking. All these names and all these fights to remember. Jesse Butler. I thought that's a perfect fight for him to debut in the UFC. And you guys heard me say it. If I could choose a kind of debut for him, I would have said UFC Apex, lower on the fight card, and they did exactly that. They gave him a guy at the very bottom of the division, coming off a knockout loss. Nothing could be more perfect about the circumstances for Jeka Sargi's debut. I'm really happy with how the UFC handled that. So I know they're trying to tee him up to be able to like fight on this Jakarta show next year. But to do that, like, I got to imagine he has a pretty short leash already in the UFC, just coming in off of a loss. So there's that. All right, let's get to your questions. Streams have become a routine. Appreciate it. Cheers, my man. Been researching old MMA names like Genki Sudo, fun, Kazushi Sakuraba, and now Katsunori Kakuno. Are you a fan of Kakuno? Yeah, he was really fun. If I remember, he fought with like one of those really wide stances and kind of like moved his hands around a lot. He was fun. It's crazy that you're calling it like an old name because it doesn't seem like too long ago he was in the UFC. But yeah, and I can't remember, is he still fighting? Yeah. Yeah, sorry, switched it a little bit too quickly. Fun to examine their names. Yeah, it is. It's interesting how so many fighters that didn't ever like get into the rankings in the UFC are so forgotten. Like none of those guys ever. I mean, Sakuraba is different. Everyone loves and knows Sakuraba, but like some of those fighters were really fun. Like Kikuno, yeah, he was really fun. And then he's American, but of Filipino background. Mark Munoz, if you remember him, he was fun. A lot of knockout power. Still remember when he knocked out Matt Hamill. He was really fun, kind of from that same era of Kikuno. Yeah. So thoughts on Viacom being happy that Vassal and Bader fell through because they didn't want to pay them. Is Bellator falling apart? It doesn't seem like they are falling apart just yet. If they were falling apart, you would see fighters you would see them like releasing lots of like big name fighters. I still have no idea what's going to happen with Bellator. Still have no idea. Even my best guess, I I don't. It's hard for me to see how this is going to play out. But yeah, that is an interesting thing with Bader and Vassal. My guess is that, so like if Bellator were to close up shop at the end of the year, my guess was like they would like pay out any fighter contract that still had fights left. I don't know how that would work, but my guess is that it doesn't mean that they owe them, both those guys, $0. I don't think that's necessarily how it would work, but whether they're going to get some kind of compensation, or maybe they could even try to rebook that fight for the Bellator 301 event. Have no idea if there's going to be any Bellator shows past the November show, but gosh, it just seems like this is getting drug out so long. Just feel like we've been talking about this literally since the beginning of the year, maybe even longer. But yeah, those are two older guys that have been around for a long time, so they get paid a lot. Was really interesting seeing what Ryan Bader left on that Instagram comment, basically saying like, you know, Viacom is kind of relieved that they didn't have to do it. So yeah, all that to say, I am looking forward to this Bellator show on Saturday and the show after that. You know, I think it was when Dana White said it at the press conference at Contender Series this week. He was like, it's like good for everyone for Bellator to be around. It's not like a bad thing for Bellator to be here. I all of a sudden kind of just started thinking like, what will happen? Like, is Bellator going to be one of those promotions that we appreciate more once they're gone? I feel like Bellator is this promotion that like has been one of the most steady, consistent promotions. They've never really had like that massive money fight or money event, but they have always kept things moving. They've always been really stable. They've always had pretty good talent. They've always had at least a lot of recognizable names on their roster. And they run pretty meritocratically. Like the top guy gets the title shot most of the time in Bellator. Of course, they have these Grand Prix a lot too, which kind of orchestrates that and arranges that. But so much in MMA, you have fighters that you're like, why are they getting a title shot? Why are we getting an immediate rematch of that? And I feel like Bellator is such like a logical, sensible promotion where I wonder, like, once Bellator is gone, are we going to miss them? It's starting to feel more and more like Bellator and PFL are sort of like crowding the same space. And so there's really only room for one of them going forward, which is why it makes sense for all of this to happen. I still don't think that PFL is smart if they're going to be buying Bellator and taking their roster. I still don't know if that's a super smart idea. I think it would be better just to maybe take like five to like 8 fighters from their roster and then release the rest. But I don't know. Again, I have no idea on how things are going to go, what they're going to do with that. But yeah, I mean, and who has ever said a bad thing about Scott Coker? I mean, besides like people that accuse him of being boring or not being this super like bombastic promoter. But like, what like fighter or manager has ever said anything bad about Scott Coker? Really nobody. So a pretty respectable organization. I would have loved to have seen more from their time here. I would have loved to have seen them be a little bit more aggressive to get some of the top talent, but they did a lot and they contributed a lot to the MMA space for sure. Thoughts on the one contracts thing? Yeah, that's been fun this this week. Basically, okay, so someone pointed out a good distinction. So we saw the contract for the that Kyrgyz guy. I forget his name, but he fought on the One Friday Fight show, and then we saw the contract for Adriano Moraes. One thing that it is worth noting that one championship has 2 tiers, and so yeah, like the contract for Adriano Moraes in 2020 is very different from a fighter that fights on One Friday Fights in 2023. Those are different contracts, different tiers. I still think it's pretty reprehensible to offer a fighter 1.5 to show and 1.5 to win. I mean, you're not going to attract the top talent for that. You're just not going to attract the top guys. People will say, well, in Thailand, that's a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. But like, trust me, like as a manager, I got so many other offers from like promotions much lower than that all the time. Like I managed a Chinese guy, and I would get offers from like all these other like B and C level promotions that were much higher than that. That was just normal. 1.5, 1.5. That's like a very, very regional show. And it's fine if you're from Thailand, but we're not talking about Thailand here. We're talking about fighters from Europe and the US and from all around Asia and around the world. Like 1.5 to show and win it's not much at all. And you're just not going to attract the top fighters. And I've talked about this before on the show. And when I got our guy to fight for them, we actually negotiated way more than that with one championship. We got way more than that. So yeah, we were not like we would not have fought for one championship if that was what we were going to get. No way. It's sad that it's seen as this like, well, train and fight your ass off and like give your blood, sweat, and tears for this fight, because maybe someday in the future it might pay off and you'll make more money. But for now, you just have to make this like really low amount. Yeah, I stand by that. That's pretty like inexcusable pay. The contract stuff. So I listened to the Bloody Elbow podcast with John Nash and Stephanie Haynes, where they go through the one contract. Check it out on Bloody Elbow if you haven't already. But they basically go through the one contract and point out different things. And the one thing about Adriano Moraes' contract that was not under scrutiny, that was not criticized, was his pay. No one's saying he didn't get paid very much. No one's criticizing his pay. So that's where it was. And it's honestly pretty good pay for where he was in 2020. Like I forget what it was, but he was making like, what was it, like 50K or 100. He made somewhere around 100K from that fight, plus whatever else, every other bonus he would have gotten. But so the pay for one's like top like 5% is pretty good. But what was criticized in that contract was how strict it was. They have the strictest champions clause in any MMA promotion. It was basically like, if you win the championship, then you're automatically extended for like 4 more fights in 2 more years. And for one championship, it was like, we'll guarantee you 2 fights every 4 years, which is like not that much compared to, or at least like we can offer you 2 fights a year, which is pretty low for most promotions. Like I think most would try to give you like 3 fights a year at least if you're on like a multi-fight deal. So that's pretty low. The champions clause, very restrictive, extremely restrictive on like a lot of kind of PR and marketing stuff of like, you can't have an interview. You can't have an interview with the media without one's consent. So basically one is almost acting as like essentially like managerial duties to vet media. they really, really, really want, like, one championship wants full control over how they're perceived in the world. And to do that, they have hired external media publications to write favorably about them. They have these rules about you can't have an interview with the media unless we say so. And they basically like are like, yeah, you can't go out in public with your belt unless we give you permission. And you can only like, yeah, it would just very, very, very strong restrictions on how you're even able to market yourself as a champion, bearing their tools. And they're basically like, yeah, like the actual belt, like we have the right to take that from you whenever you want. So people think that one championship is this like super like mom and pop shop, family oriented, all these like positive values. Like that is all branding, guys. That's all PR and just image management. Like y'all, like one championship is just as like cutthroat, vicious, and like backstabbing as every single other MMA promotion. Trust me. Like, yeah, I hear stuff all the time, and I hear stories all the time from fighters and managers about getting screwed over or just like being treated pretty mercilessly. And I'm not the one to like come out with those stories, but and I'm not saying that they're worse than other MMA promotions. Honestly, they're all kind of the same. They're all pretty cutthroat, but don't for a second think that like one championship is gonna like that they are like the city on the hill of MMA. They're not. And you know, I'm not saying bad things about their fighters. I'm not intentionally just trying to like trash them, but I'm just telling you that's what I've heard. And we saw, and now we have some proof of that with the contract that came out this last week. But yeah, it's like when MMA fighters, they don't have much of a chance. Like I heard some people saying like, well, if you don't like the contract, don't sign it. You're not being forced into signing the contract. But okay, like just realize that like if you're a fighter that's like pretty good, you don't have a lot of options of where you can fight. Like the number of potential employers for you to fight high level MMA is very, very short. And a lot of those may not be interested in you. So it's true. If you don't like the contract, don't sign it. When I managed a fighter, if they weren't going to pay us better than that 1.5 and 1.5, we weren't going to sign with them. But we were able to get some better money that was more, that was closer to like what other promotions, honestly, that were on like a lower level were offering. And so that's why we ended up taking the fight. But yeah, I hope it improves. But yeah, that's what I have to say. Hey, I love watching one championship. I'm not trashing the fighters, not trashing the fights. I'll be excited to watch the fights tomorrow, but just telling you, this is the way it is. That's how it is. Also, if you could, it's still a month away, but little prediction on how JCK versus Butler will go in your opinion, and what JCK should do to win that fight. Well, I think he should. I don't know a whole lot about Butler. I think he's got, because yeah, it's like fight was just announced this week. I don't really keep up with like a lot of US regional MMA, and basically like Jesse Butler. I mean, he's just 0-1 in the UFC. So I don't know a whole lot about his game. I think I may have missed that fight that he debuted. But he fought Jim Miller. Jim Miller actually knocked him out on the feet. Let's just take a look at Jesse Butler's profile. So he trains out of a small gym in Louisiana. Actually, I don't know where he's training right now. On Tapology, we don't have a gym listed for him. So a lot of times that means it's like a small gym. Let me actually just look at his Instagram real quick. So yeah, he's 12-5. KJ. Okay, so here's something interesting. Jesse Butler is actually training at Hillcliff FC. So that's great. But as we know, sometimes it takes a while for you to train somewhere before you actually really get into the system and before you really see a lot of the payoff somewhere. So wouldn't put too much stock in that. But JCK training at Studio 504 in San Diego, California. They just recently opened up a new facility that's much bigger. So that is great. All those Indonesian guys back in San Diego training. JCK, I mean, you guys know what he's good at. He's got good KO power, and you saw his weakness. You saw him getting taken down and smashed by Anshul in his last fight. So I don't know enough about Butler to really be able to craft a strategy apart from like Butler's probably going to try and take him down, and JCK will probably want to try to keep things standing is what I would say. But yeah, don't know enough to really be able to say too much more than that. I'm a big fan of one, and that's great. But Angela Lee retirement seemed extremely exploitive in the production of her retirement. I think keep that stuff out of the promotional limelight. Thoughts? So, okay, so I think what you're saying is like parading some of that like trauma into the production of the show can seem a little bit exploitative. And I can see how you would come to that conclusion. And I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. It's not, I don't know. On the other hand, it like Angela Lee has come to a place where she seems very open to talk about all of these things. And she's not going to be fighting again, at least for the foreseeable future. We all know how MMA retirements go, but yeah, with her, it could be different. Yeah, on the other hand, if they didn't cover it on the broadcast, I think that would be different. And if it was for a different fighter too, it would be different too. But you have to realize like Angela Lee essentially was the face of the promotion for several years. And she was probably like One Championship's most loved fighter on their roster. She was a pretty entertaining fighter, usually put on really exciting fights, really embodied a lot of things that one kind of brands himself with. So I think like for them to not cover it at all in the broadcast, where she's at and where she's going, would seem a little bit strange. Like just thinking if they were just to be like, yeah, Angela Lee announced earlier this week that she's retiring. You know, I don't know. I feel like fans of One Championship would feel a little bit cut short with that. And I think their hope was to try and like make things as seamless as possible for the next champion. But yeah, things do get a little bit weird when you really like kind of parade a fighter and their trauma around. My only hope is that like Angela Lee really had total agency of how she was represented and treated. She, at least at this point, doesn't seem unhappy with how one has treated her, at least not publicly. So time will tell if she still feels that way. But I personally didn't have a problem with it. But yeah, wishing the best to her. I see what you're saying. It can get a little bit weird when we sort of like trauma porn a fighter's background and past, especially when it's pretty recent, for sure. Listening to Jack Slack on Patreon, he was very excited for Lee versus Fraimanov. Why isn't one hyping up that since Vazeev is in Fraimanov's corner? I wonder if like most of the promotional muscle from One Championship recently was going into that Stamp versus Hong fight and last week's card, that this week feels a little bit overshadowed. I mean, Stamp versus Hom and Angela Lee, all that stuff, that was a much bigger story than this weekend's fight card. So I think that's why, is just 2 cards back to back. Also, it's for an interim title. And so, yeah, and neither guy has really like proven themselves to be like the star that like Stamp has or Angela Lee has. So I think that's probably why it feels a little bit flatter. Why is MMA Fighting treating Suarez as already the 150-pound champion? Jed Meshew and Kay Lee said that she easily runs through Weili in defense multiple times. Disrespectful opinions, fair or just bigotry? What gives them the right to dismiss a sitting champion like that? Well, I don't think. If that's their opinion, if they think that a top contender has what it takes to beat a champion and defend it, that's fine. I'm not offended by that. I think what's interesting is a lot of the conversation is turning to Suarez versus Zhang versus, and not Yan versus Zhang. I thought that I still think that Yan Xiaonan is like the clear contender, and that's like the fight to make. I don't feel like Tatiana Suarez yet is like, I don't think that she's there in terms of being the #1 contender. That's all Yan Xiaonan, in my opinion. Yan has Suarez just doesn't have the resume at strawweight, in my opinion, to challenge. Both of those fighters last fought Jessica Andrade, but Yan had the more impressive performance. She got the first round knockout, whereas Suarez got the second round guillotine choke. Overall, Yan is just the more proven fighter at strawweight. I do think Suarez is a future title contender. Don't know if she's a future champion yet, but I still think that Yan is being overlooked by many. So I would agree with you there. And I would like to see Suarez fight one more time before getting a title shot. I don't know against whom, but that's my opinion. Do you think UFC dropped the ball on Cedric Doumbé? Doumbé? He seemed like such a star over at PFL. Well, yeah, I mean, that's the problem with the UFC's system of like on the one hand, it's like Doumbé, he's not a proven MMA fighter and star. Now he is a little bit more, but I think it was last year when UFC was going to go to Paris, he was still only 2-0, 3-0, and he was not a proven fighter yet. So because of that, the UFC was offering him 10-10, 12-12, something like that, like they would most fighters that are coming in at a lower level into the organization or off of Contender Series. So for them, I think the UFC just didn't realize his star potential, and he also just wasn't proven yet. What I would have done if I was Doumbé's management is I would have been knowing how big of a star he could be, I would have asked for a very short UFC contract, either a 1-fight deal or a 2 or 3 fight deal, just so you can basically tell the UFC, wait and see. You'll see really soon how big of a star this guy is. But yeah, I do think that they dropped the ball, but they just didn't know how big he could be. And maybe that's on them for not knowing that, but he is, yeah. He definitely could be one of those big guys to be the face of the PFL, for sure. It's so interesting to me how a lot of PFL's top fighters that have the highest ceiling in terms of must-watch star power are all the European guys. You got him, you got Lazy King, Abduragimov, and then you've got another guy now a lot of people are talking about, Lewis McGrillen. He looks really good too, and I think he could become a pretty big star for England as well. So we keep talking about how PFL just doesn't have the roster right now. They don't have any of those massive stars, but give them a year or two and they could start to have some pretty solid guys, some noteworthy star power fueled fighters. So yeah, he looked, I mean, flawless performance. Literally couldn't do any better. Familiar with Tong Kai? Oh yeah. He's from a tiny city that holds celebrations when someone gets high test scores or gets into college in the US. Yeah, that's cool. City is called Shaoyang, China. Let's see where that's at. I'm like fairly familiar with Chinese geography. Shaoyang, okay, it's in Hunan province. Yeah, and not really close to any big cities either. That's really cool, though. Don't know if you knew that one heavily promoted the celebration. I did see that. That was very cool. Celebration of Tong Kai winning the belt at Shaoyang, but people don't know that city in China will hold big celebrations for everything. Totally. Yeah, I did see that, and I think that one does a lot of things right with their champions. Champions clause is excluded, as we talked about earlier on the show, but I did see that, and that was really cool. I hope that Tong can be back in action soon, because I do think he's also one of the Chinese MMA fighters that's just very much forgotten, for sure. Oh, okay. You're typing. Let me skip down to your question. What are your thoughts on the absolutely brutal, humiliating one-side destruction of Deep in JMMA by Black Combat? How can Big Shig ever recover from such a massacre? Yeah, I did talk about that after the show happened. I think that it was a good collaboration. Like Black Combat still just hasn't really like earned its place in like Deep is such an established organization in Asia, and Black Combat is still mostly only known to Korean MMA fans. I don't know how well known it's like with Japan or other countries, but at least here in the U.S., English-speaking fans, not really well known, not a household name yet. Korea, much different, but so I honestly expected Deep to do a little bit better, but yeah, they did get their ass whipped for sure. You have to realize at the last show, like, wasn't it like the first two fights were won by Deep fighters, and then there was a couple upsets too, right? Like Saori Oshima lost, Juri Ohara lost, so a couple upsets too. I just think that like Korean MMA is really hot right now. A lot of those fighters are overperforming on the regional scene. So, and that's coming from a lot of really strong gyms in Korea. So that's why I think we call them upsets, and why like it was so startling when that happened was just like, yeah, and a lot of really great prospects coming from that show for sure. Do I know about the Chinese kickboxing ace Wang Kahan? She closed her gym down without notice, and members and coaches were not refunded. Seems very bad. I do not. Let me see if I've not heard that name. Wang Kahan. Dang, 27 years old. Yeah, pretty solid record too. Closed her gym down without warning. Interesting. I didn't. I'll keep my ear to the ground on that and maybe look into that. It's too bad. Remember back in 2018, people were saying that Weili got lucky not to fight Murata at Ryzen. I think that Murata was the one who dodged a bullet. Ryzen fans are weird, right? Well, they can't. Yeah, they can be. At that time, though, it was a much closer fight. Before Weili signed with the UFC, before she had like made the rounds at a lot of different gyms, all that. Before she was really well known, at least globally, like that fight felt a lot more even. But obviously now it seems like a huge mismatch for sure. Will the UFC ever go back to Singapore? Yeah, I think so. You mentioned the contract was up. Are they not renewing? I haven't heard one way or the other on that. Just with them, it seems like their schedule for Asia next year could be pretty busy, trying to get to China maybe twice next year, trying to get to Jakarta, Indonesia, and then I don't know, maybe the opportunity is passed for a Korea show, but and then Abu Dhabi, you kind of throw that in there too. I just don't know if there's going to be a whole lot of room in the schedule. Plus, wherever else they may go, they could go to Kazakhstan next year. I don't know if next year will be the time, but ever again, totally, they'll totally go back to Singapore. They love Singapore. It's an arena that is very centrally located throughout Southeast Asia. It's very easy to get to. They can charge pretty good ticket prices for those shows, and the arena can hold like 10,000-11,000 people. So they love going there. I know they'll probably be back there, but it may be a second before they go back there. That's my guess. That is my guess. Have no idea if Singapore Board of Tourism is trying to renew that deal or not. Ray, no clever pun today. Come on, let me down. Is it true that in combat sports in general that champions can become stagnant because of more money, riches, and yes men, i.e. Ronda and Conor? Yeah, they can. They can. To play devil's advocate, put yourself in the position where if you're an MMA fighter and you know how much sacrifice and how much of a toll it takes on your body to do a training camp at a championship level, and then to fight in a potentially 5-round title fight, to consistently do that. Imagine if there was a way where you could make tons and tons of money without having to do that. What would you do in that situation? So there's that. Just that's something to consider. And for Conor McGregor, he started other businesses. He makes a lot of money off of sponsorships, all these things. And for him, like, you really don't need to fight. And so I can understand it, although it is personally disappointing to me when a fighter gets really big and then all of a sudden they drop off the map and we don't get to see them fight as often as we would like to see them. I'm with you. I'm as frustrated as all of us are with Conor McGregor. I just want to see the guy fight. I want to see him fight. I would love to even see him fight winnable fights. I just want that magic that we had in 2016 back. We all do. But yeah, so stagnant in terms of non-activity, potentially stagnant in terms of like growing in their skills. When I was listening to the Luke Thomas podcast today, he was talking with Beneil Dariush, and there was a question that was asked on his podcast about do like champions over the age of 35 having a really bad record. And Beneil Dariush was basically just saying like, well, yeah, like the more you fight, especially at a championship level, you've got a target on your back. And there's so much fight footage out there and everyone's studying you that it is really hard to like consistently surprise people and grow without people figuring out your game plan. So in that sense too, it's like, it is so hard to be dominant for a long time and consistently beat the best because like eventually you get figured out. So that's not even so much about being stagnant as much as it is just like, it's hard to like do the exact same thing over and over and get the same amount of results. That's why someone like Anderson Silva is so impressive, because he was such a mystery for so long. And then the Chris Weidmans came along and also age caught up to him. And, he never returned back to what he was. But yeah, I mean, we all like to criticize fighters for being in love with money, but I just wonder how many of us, if we were in that position, would choose to like take the Volkanovski route and just like fight 2 to 3 times a year, you know, like and be an active champion, continually growing. That's how I feel. Yes men, maybe that's more, I think more of like a Ronda Rousey thing of like being surrounded by yes men, and really that's a whole nother rabbit hole. I think that was kind of unique to her situation of just like not really being challenged in training in the way that she should have because of her success. So yeah, that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But yeah, very interesting question. Appreciate that. What's your opinion on that Nina person who does strange UFC interviews? Are you talking about the Scrap did an article about her today? Check out the Scrap if you guys haven't already. Publication I used to work for. Yeah, Nina Marie Danielle. You know, I don't really consume her content a whole lot. I think a lot of people, I'm just scrolling through Twitter right now, not just like on my phone. I think that it seems like the criticism that she has had is just that like she does brand herself with a lot of like sexiness for sure. And I think that probably rubs some MMA fans the wrong way. And probably also like some people would say the whole like playing it safe argument. All I gotta say is that in the MMA media space, there is room for a lot of different kinds of content, and not all of it needs to be like deeply analytical. Not all of it needs to be done with a totally straight face. Not all of it needs to be MMA junkie or MMA fighting or whatever your like mainstream publication is. And so I don't like, I honestly think it's kind of cool that there are some people that are sort of toying the like MMA media, also like social media influencer route, because I mean, that is like MMA media that's really like suited for, I would say like, yeah, younger generation. It's a different kind of MMA media as people are moving away from website-based MMA media and more towards social media, getting that for their news, their coverage. Having like more of an influencer style makes a lot of sense. So again, I haven't really consumed a lot of her media to really be able to like say one way or another, but I will say, yeah, there's room for a lot of different things. I like briefly toyed with the idea, not obviously not what she's doing, but just like how much do I bring my own person and my own personality into covering MMA media? True journalists would say that like you need to sort of like disappear and just let the stories take front center, let the subjects, you know, kind of run the show, leave yourself out of it. But so that's like journalism, but a lot of us aren't trying to be journalists. We're trying to make entertaining content that fans enjoy and that we can also make a living doing. So if she can make a living off of it, that's fine. That's great. Nothing bad to say about that. Also, I always give props to people trying new and interesting ways to bring in and engage MMA fans. So that's what I would say about it. Do you think that there will be an Asian event in the Las Vegas Dome like Dana White wanted? No. Why only Mexican events at Las Vegas? Why are there so many in the MMA community complaining about the cultural appropriation? I loved everything about UFC Noche. Yeah, so probably won't be an Asian event at the Sphere just because of location. With I'm with everyone that says like UFC should hold the Noche UFC events. Actually, go figure, in Mexico if they're celebrating Mexican Independence Day. But having like Spanish speaking or Mexican fighters on cards that are in like Texas, anywhere in the Southwest, in California, those parts of the U.S. have pretty large Spanish-speaking population, Mexican populations. So I think that's why, like, first of all, you see a lot of those fighters on those cards. Also, why UFC feels comfortable that they can have a packed show celebrating Mexican Independence Day in Las Vegas instead of actually in Mexico. Because you are still in the Southwest, you're going to get a lot of people potentially driving from nearby areas, from Southern California. So there's that, but I don't see like that kind of Asian population packing out an arena in Las Vegas like maybe a Mexican Independence Day would. And also there isn't like a holiday celebrating, because again, like, okay, that's very targeted on like Mexico, on like a Mexican holiday. But if you're celebrating like I don't know, it'd have to be like a Chinese holiday, or I don't know. There isn't really like an equivalent holiday that's celebrated and has like a tradition in the US where they could like pack out Las Vegas. I know, obviously I know there's lots of holidays in Asian countries, especially like India has like a big holiday every month, it seems. But yeah, I don't know how that would work. If you're going to have an Asian themed card, just have it in Singapore, Jakarta, or Shanghai. Because that way, that's the other thing, is like having it in the right time zone as well. Easy to do that in Las Vegas. And the Sphere, I was looking on their website last night, and it's just like, that was pretty mesmerizing. If you guys don't know anything about the Sphere in Las Vegas, this brand new arena that just opened in September, that I don't even know, like, it kind of just like explodes some of my categories. I guess they'll have concerts there, movies maybe. I don't even know. Sporting events, I don't even know how that would work. Like, I almost feel like the screen could be too much of a distraction. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm at the Sphere in Las Vegas, am I looking more at the screen or more at the two little people fighting in the cage on the ground? I don't know. But it's really cool. Check it out if you haven't. Look up the Sphere in Las Vegas. Crazy, crazy venue, for sure. Saying that you boycott SCMP MMA because Nick Atkin called you a disrespectful troll. Said I was trolling when I said, why do you two forget about the takes you mentioned in previous shows? Why are they so sensitive over SCMP? Never trolled yet. Get excused. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what you're referring to. I have a different experience with South China Morning Post. I've been on a couple of their like live fight companions for one championship. I don't know Nick Atkins super well, but like I have a good relationship with him. I have a really good relationship with John Hyun Ko. I personally owe a lot to him, and Tom Taylor as well, stand-up guy as well. So all I can say is that I have a different relationship with them than you do. I'm not saying you're not justified in feeling that way, but yeah, that's how I feel about those guys. I can't comment on that certain situation, but overall, I think those guys are pretty good at their jobs, for sure. Is Butler versus Jekka going to be like Magny versus Hands of Steel? Well, pretty massive skill difference. So you can put your mind at ease at that. I think it'll be a lot different. Can Jekka defend the takedown? A lot of the fight will depend on that. So, but Jekka, you know Jekka, he only needs a little bit of space, a little bit of time to land a crazy punch and shut out the lights. So we'll see. Kind of hard to predict in a lot of ways. Why do so many MMA channels and people obsess over fight picks? Even the best analysts in the world admit that they don't know what's going on to happen in fights. Yet MMA people hold it against you if you get a pick wrong. Well, that's your fault if you hold someone to their word on a fight pick. What's the culture of fight picks and predictions when it's a sport that's also so volatile? I mean, can you really imagine a world in which we don't pick fights? That's like half the conversation of being an MMA fan is just picks. When I'm at the coffee shop that I always go to and I'm working, and there's a couple people in that coffee shop that are regulars that when they walk in, they ask whatever the next UFC pay-per-view is. Their first question is, who are you picking in this Adesanya fight? Who are you picking in the Makhachev Oliveira fight? That is their first question, and it always will be. And so I think that is the way of things. And I can't imagine MMA without predicting fights or just making picks. It's part of the fun of it. It's part of the investment into the sport, is seeing if your prediction is true. And with betting, I mean, you have to imagine betting is a huge influence in that as well. And betting profits off of us making picks and predictions and being so invested in that way. We always, I mean, I think maybe it was the week before, maybe it was you, someone asked about like, why do we always talk about pound for pound? It's because that's just who we are as fans, is we like to think about hypothetical situations. And we like to think about a world where there are no regulatory rules preventing this guy in this promotion against that promotion, or even these two fighters in different weight classes. We like to use our imaginations. So, sue us. I think when I've made picks on my, like when I'll make a prediction video, I'll research the fight, which means I usually I look at both fighters' records. I look at where they're at in their career, and then I usually watch back the last 3 fights if I can. If I'm like really taking the prediction seriously. I know I make predictions all the time, or just like kind of off the cuff picks all the time. Like I did earlier in the show, I talked about Jekka versus Jesse Butler or whoever. But yeah, it's a fun practice for me, because for me to try and make a prediction in a fight or analyze a fight, it actually like teaches me more about the game when I'm watching it from a certain angle. And that all comes from like fighters who are preparing for certain opponents, who are trying to predict what their opponent's going to do, and the coach making a game plan, all of that. So it's just part of the sport. But you're right, we shouldn't hold it against people if they get it wrong. Again, betting. That is, I think, why people do hold it against people, because they lose money. They say, I trusted you, and I'm gonna go take my business, my viewership elsewhere. So I think betting has a lot to play into that. Better way to have handled Lee's retirement would have been to hold a separate press conference, not during the middle of an event. Okay. Because it made the event about Angela Lee and not Stamp versus Hom. Okay, I can see that. I think you're coming from the argument of like, Angela Lee wasn't even fighting on the card, so why have basically like this mini like retirement ceremony for her? I think that is where you're coming from with that. So maybe like at the weigh-ins, maybe, or before the show started at all. Yeah, kind of in the middle of it. I can understand that. Yeah, I think I can get on board with that. I mean, Angela Lee is always been able to be the face of one championship. So yeah, I think so. I think just like being able to I'm just kind of going back and forth in my mind thinking about that. Having all the fans there maybe was really important. Not just like a media only thing. I think if I would have done it, I would have maybe tagged it onto the back of the weigh-ins and been like, hey, stick around after the weigh-ins for a special announcement from Angela Lee. So I think that could have maybe been a better way to handle it for sure. Message for the mods there. MMA picks for life. Let's go. Exactly. I think it's great that Lee retired after she's been through the. After all she's been through, just the production had me cringing. Sure. Well, you won't have to sit through that anymore with Angela. If that was annoying, it's in the past. So I guarantee you, from here on out, it's going to be the Stamp show. So, yeah. Now Stamp is that fighter that you're going to see everywhere. You're going to see her dance. You're going to see all of her little her quotes and highlights. You're going to see all those everywhere. So it is now the Stamp show, the Stamp era for sure. Appreciate that, Mario, that feedback. And thank you so much for all your questions, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate all of you. And yeah, enjoy the fights this weekend. Enjoy Kanako Murata, Aoriqileng. One Fight Night 15, One Pride MMA. AFC. Okay, here's the other thing. I just remembered. I forgot to mention this. AFC apparently is having an event on Sunday, but as of now, I still haven't heard the fight card for that. However, okay, I know this is like awkward. I was about to end the show, but I just remembered this. I was going to bring it up earlier. AFC announced that they're going to have AFC 29 this Sunday. Not a single fight announced, but they have announced like a gajillion fighters for the card. Ko Seok-hyun, really great prospect. Park Jae-hyun, who fought at Road to UFC, he's going to be fighting on the card. Choi Hong-gil is also on the card. Hong Jun-young is on, like, a lot of really good Korean fighters on this fight card. Yet they have not announced anything anywhere of the actual fights. Really strange. Don't know why they would do that. But stay tuned to my stuff. I'll probably put out like a YouTube short. I'll probably put it on my other social medias as well once that gets announced. But interesting. But all that to say, enjoy the fights. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Stay safe. And we'll see you next week on the channel.